Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 90. I'm Enigmus, and today you're just in time. We're starting off on the superstructure of our CV, the Cetorhinus. We've got the hangar built. It's 95% done. It's all just detail work that we have left to do inside and out. For now, I just wanted to start working on the superstructure because it's a little bit ambitious. There's going to be some complex curves and shapes coming together in a number of different places, the way that I've got it in my head. And it's one of those kinds of designs where you can never really be happy about anything you're doing on the build until you start getting things roughed in on the parts that are going to be the most difficult. So that's what I'm doing. And I decided to start this time with a little bit of detail around the area where the elevator comes up from the hangar. Just because of the way everything is assembled, we've got the core very close to that. We've also got the cockpit temporarily very close to that whole thing. It's sitting on top of that little platform that we made, and I say temporarily because eventually it's going to be moved forward inside the upper portion of the ship. But the whole idea is that this particular area of the ship with the elevator will be visible from a number of different angles when you're looking at the ship, and because it's visible, in theory, it means it can also be hit by enemy fire, and I wanted to protect it. So that's why I'm basically going around and just building sort of like a circle, and then we're going to reinforce that circle, so it's going to be a couple of layers deep in any one spot with more combat steel. This whole thing is combat steel. We're not taking any shortcuts with that. Even, walls and tiny details where we have the option to choose what kind of blocks we want to make them out of, it's all combat steel. So you can see it's not a perfect circle, but it's set up in such a way so that when you've got the hangar and then you've got this little gap of a couple of blocks and then you've got the superstructure sitting on top of it, when you look in, it'll look like you did something on purpose back here, which is another kind of this design philosophy that I keep repeating in all of my different builds, is making things look like they were done on purpose, like they were part of some sort of conscious design, as opposed to got to those many places that we've all encountered in our previous builds where we don't really have a plan, so we just kind of slap things together so that we can get from point A to point C. Point B could have used a little bit of refinement. We could have done a better job in point B, but all we had in our mind at the time was point A and point C, so that's what we did. I try to avoid that, and for me it's about just a little bit of patience and a little bit of planning, but mostly patience, I would have to say. Is I'm not in so much of a rush to get to the next stage of the build that I want to take shortcuts with any one area. So now you get sort of an idea of what it's starting to look like, and it becomes time for one of my favorite things, setting up the profiles. And these are going to be the guides that we use for pretty much everything that we're going to be doing with this superstructure. We have all of the equipment that is necessary to have a functional ship has to be attached to this superstructure in some way. The hangar is off limits. We're not going to be attaching thrusters to it. We're not going to be putting any equipment in it. Well, maybe we'll have like oxygen stations and med bays and things of that nature, so that if you're out exploring or adventuring or whatever, just to save time, it would be accessible from the hangar. That would be something that would make sense. But when we're talking about storage, ammunition containers, RCS units, all the bevy of machines that are required to make a ship go, we aren't going to be putting in the hangar. So we have to keep that in mind when we're, first of all, allocating space in these profiles for the superstructure, but also envisioning how large this superstructure is going to be and where those particular areas are going to be where we can put things. Because in some cases, it's going to be just large enough with the superstructure so that you can maybe wander around inside that space, but in terms of wanting to go into those areas and access machines or storage or anything like that, not going to be necessarily the easiest thing to do. So with laying out these profiles, what it allows us to do is get a more accurate interpretation of what we have in terms of space with the various different things that we're incorporating. We can have all of these ideas in our head, but I mean, I find some people might be much better at it than I am, and I acknowledge that, but I find that quite often it doesn't take the full shape in my head until I've also got something in the game that I can use as a reference to scale everything else to. So you can see here what we've got is basically, if you envision like an arm reaching from the top where the core is and around down the side of the hangar, that's going to be one of the details that we have, and it's going to have the lift thrusters, 2 lift thrusters on either side of the ship, and they will be built into these arms that are coming around. We might also have the opportunity to put some of the other equipment in the nooks and crannies. Things like RCS units might be able to fit here because they're not the kind of thing that you need to access ever. Once you've placed them, probably the only time you would ever need to access them is if you took a lot of damage in that area and you wanted to check and make sure that they were okay. But realistically speaking, we've taken a little bit of extra time in setting up that profile to smooth it off a little bit, just to kind of see. It's one of those really awkward sort of arm designs where it's covering a large area, but it still ends up looking awfully 90 degrees in the translation from the top of the hangar down to the side. It's okay. We'll see how it goes once we finally get some thrusters in there, and that will give us an opportunity to kind of gauge whether we are satisfied with the design or not. Now, this rear section is kind of going to be more along the lines of wings. Very strange downward curved wings. I have no functional plans for these particular areas in the very back of the ship yet, just because the design that I had for the ship included basically the superstructure sitting on top and then the 2 arms with the thrusters reaching around the sides. And in order to just balance the build in my mind, we needed something on the back there that was just kind of visible from the front with all this other stuff going on. So that's what we're setting up that profile for in the back. You can see here, trying to place these thrusters and not realizing that I'm going to say it's a bit of a bug. I can't think of anything that I might have done differently in order to make this work, but I'm trying to get the thruster to position itself on that wall that I've created for myself out of the combat steel, basically on the opposite side of the wall to the one that I've already placed, and it won't go. It won't come over to this side. You can see the box, the bounding box is on the other side. It was fortunate that I was kind of just thinking in terms of, well, I'll just sort of finish off the exterior part of this appendage that's holding these thrusters just so that I can see how it's going to look. And through that, I was able to figure out that, oh, there is another way that I can get this thruster attached where I want it, but it involves having a wall basically oriented the same way as I have that other thruster on the other side. So imagine if the ship is facing north and we had to be facing south to attach the first thruster to that wall that we've got. We have to build another wall around and then attach it to the south of that wall to get... I know, if you're confused, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, I was confused the whole time, wondering what the hell I was thinking about, until we came up with the design that will allow us to get the thruster attached. Maybe it's a known bug, and it's just been so long since I've used these thrusters. You can see now, there we go. No problem. As soon as we built a wall that we could put it attached to the same wall in the same orientation as the first one, it worked just fine. The important thing here is we've got a couple of thrusters that are going to be attached to this appendage, and then there will be 2 on the other side as well. So that gives 4 lift thrusters, which is, I believe, what we had on the previous CV. The hard thing about remembering exactly what I had on the previous CV is that in order to have these thrusters to put on this one, I've already taken them off of the old one. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I've got the thrusters. I didn't have to pay any extra materials for them, but I can't go back to the old ship and see exactly what I used to have. I'm pretty sure that 4 is going to be okay. If it turns out to be lackluster in the lift department, we can always add more. It's not that big of a deal. We're going to have plenty of room for things like fuel tanks and generators and things of that nature, that adding more thrusters, even the extra large capital vessel thrusters, isn't going to be that kind of an onerous task where we have to rethink the whole model for fuel consumption and all these other things, because nobody wants a capital vessel that goes from full fuel tanks to empty in 5 minutes. We were pretty close with the other one at certain points in time, but this time around we're being a little bit more careful with what we're setting up and why. And we'll leave you off for this episode at a look at yet another ellipse building in. We're going to finish off this arm in the next episode, and then we'll move on and we'll just kind of try and methodically go through the rest of the superstructure till we've got a finished ship. So if you want to be notified when I add the next episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.